Welcome back to Online Classroom Biology. This will be talking about 24.3 plant hormones. Today's objective, going over this section in the chapter, you will be able to describe the effects of hormones on plant growth and development, identify three tropisms exhibited in plants, describe how plants respond to seasonal change. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, we want to talk a little bit about what a hormone is. Okay, a hormone is going to be a chemical signal produced by living organisms that affect the growth, activity, and development of cells and tissues. They also coordinate response to the environment. Pretty much what's going to happen is this process here is the organism is going to release this chemical messenger. This chemical messenger has a target cell, so it's not going to affect all cells. It's going to affect a specific cell, that cell being called the target cell. Now, on that target cell, it has these receptors, which are proteins that are going to allow the hormone to bind to it, and then depending on whatever that hormone is, it's going to affect that cell and pretty much tell it what to do. Depending on the receptor, it's going to depend on what that cell is going to have. You can see here that they have different organs which will have different receptors. So depending on the organ and the receptor will determine pretty much what that hormone is going to cause that plant to do. Here's a list of some hormones. You will need to know these 5 here. The main one that we're going to take a look at here is auxin, and that's going to be responsible for quite a bit in the plant. Auxin here is going to be responsible for your 3 tropisms that we will go over. Now, there's more tropisms than that, but we will cover at least 3 of them, and those dealing with auxin here. You have ethylene, which is going to be used to promote fruit ripening. Cytokinins affect root growth and differentiation. Gibberellins promote seed germination. Gibberellins, make that connection there, starts with the same. And abscisic acid, or ABA, which inhibits growth. Those are some functions and plant hormones. Like I said, you will need to know these 5. There's a chart here for you, also a chart in your book as well. But let's talk about these tropisms and rapid movements. First, I do want to talk about the tropisms. Like I said, there's 3, and really a tropism is a plant sensor that's going to detect environmental stimuli, signaling elongating organs to reorient their growth. Okay, so that's a lot of scientific words for all this is saying is that it's going to dictate how a plant grows. Okay, so light, gravity, and touch, those are 3 tropisms that auxin are all related to, and it's going to dictate how a plant is going to grow for the most part. So light, that tropism is called phototropism, which makes sense. Photo, light, tropism, pretty much growth. Okay, so the tendency of a plant to grow towards the light is called phototropism. That's why a plant is going to grow up. Okay, and you actually have a plant that is going to pretty much follow that the sun as well. Okay, so it's going to always tend to grow towards the light. And actually, what happens, auxin, if you were to take a note about how auxin is related into this, is auxin is going to build up in the shaded portion of the tree or the plant, and that's going to cause that plant to grow towards that light. So phototropism is indeed growth towards light. Now gravity, and obviously if plant is growing up towards the light, which the sun is above us, you want that to defy gravity. So you kind of have this understanding here. Okay, so if you look, the plant is going to grow up towards the light. But if you look at here, this pot here is flipped upside down, and that plant still tends to grow up and against gravity, and that's gravitropism. um, gravitropism is the tropism as far as that refers to gravity, and that stem is the ability to grow upright and the roots to grow down. So the roots are going to continue to try to anchor into the soil here, and that stem is going to continue to keep that plant upright so that one, it can grow towards the light and be effective, and then also touch. Now, not all plants have uh, this, okay? These are seen mainly in vines and things like that. This is called thigmotropism, which plants will respond to growth with touch. So if it's next to a structure, something like that, it will pretty much grow around that structure. That's why you see it in vines and things like that, because they will wrap around a structure and they will pretty much grow on that structure. You see some plants such as tomatoes. You will have kind of this uh, structure that will allow it to grow, keep it up, things like that. So rapid movement is a little bit different because tropism is going to take a little bit of time. It's not instant or very quick. Rapid movement is when it is pretty quick. And if you've ever looked into what is called a sensitive plant or a Venus flytrap, okay, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about how these work. A sensitive plant is if you touch it, it kind of folds up, and that's pretty quick. It'll happen within seconds here. And same thing here with the Venus flytrap. What you have here on the Venus flytrap or pitcher plant or other carnivorous plants here is you have this little sensor, and once that sensor is affected by an insect or really anything, it's going to cause it to close, and then once it closes, it will release other hormones to pretty much break it down and digest the food. Response to seasons, we have a good understanding as far as how plants grow and that they're seasonal, that you see spring, what's the saying, April showers bring May flowers. So you have an understanding that uh, flowers bloom and grow and then dormant and things like that. So I want to talk a little bit about that and having an understanding. We talked a little bit already about it with photosynthesis when we were talking about chlorophyll being a pigment, plants losing their leaves because pretty much that chlorophyll is getting used up. Well, what else happens when that happens? So, couple things to talk about is flowering is going to be determined based off what is called photoperiod. Photo being light, period being time. So that's amount of light in the day. Now you have flowers that or plants that flower at certain seasons or different seasons. That most flowers blooming in spring, but you also have flowers such as the poinsettia that is going to bloom in winter, and that's really just based off of understanding the photo period, that it requires a certain amount of sunlight in order for the hormones to be released to cause the flowering and things like that. Photochrome is a pigment that is responsible for this photo period. So the photochrome is going to absorb or be that pigment that absorbs the sunlight that causes this photo period. Dormancy, especially when we're talking with angiosperms, where you have perennials and biennials, and you have parts where these life cycles are longer than just a year, where you don't have to continue to replace them every year. They go into this dormant phase where they're actually not dead, they're just not growing. So what happens here is as the cold weather approaches, deciduous plants, okay, those that are going to lose their leaves, will turn off photosynthetic pathways. So that's those chloroform, or not chloroform, but chlorophyll and chloroplast that are going to be located in the leaves and transport materials from leaves to roots and seal off the leaves. And that's why they end up pretty much shedding, is they die out and they fall. But the main thing to understand here is they're going to take the nutrients and store them in the roots. So all the photosynthesis, the sugar, and all of that is being produced is going to get stored in the roots. So that way that the plant is still alive and it's going to be able to bloom once you go through this period and again. And that was 24.3 plant hormones. Thank you for listening.